a special guest tonight. First time attending the class. Been married to me for 20-something years.
I didn't know you were married. All the time.
Julie, will you stand up? Wave to everybody.
She
said
doesn't
no.
want people to know that she's married.
She's shy.
Okay.
I've
been asking her. I've been asking her for forever, hey, you gonna come to my class? I have to.
It was that $5 that I gave her.
I know. Today's going to be pretty easy. The first time we went over kind of why we're doing this, kind of some ways to approach it, some of the origins of some of the other theories of the book of Revelation. The second week, I would consider maybe, at least in the early part, the most important one, understanding what the heavens and the earth are. The end of Hebrews chapter 12 kind of wraps it all up, ties it in. If you missed that one, that's a really good one. I'm recording all of these. You can catch that whenever I figure out how to put them up on YouTube. I'm going to be getting help for this, to make the video and then put the slides and have a song, intro song or whatever. I don't know.
Was that class recorded?
Yes, it was recorded. They've all been recorded so far, and this one's recording too as well. Because I got moved from November 1st to September 1st, I'm scrambling still. I'm only in the 40s on making my slides, the chapter 40s. So I was trying to get those done before I started working on the YouTube stuff, but I'm probably going to have to start doing both. Once I get out of the 40s, it gets real easy for me, and the 50s and 60s are, I know, they're like the back of my hand, and so I can just fly through them, and hopefully I can spend a little more time creating this thing so that y'all can all view, because pretty much everybody in here has asked me for the slides or the notes or the video or whatever. I will try to do that. I'm also out of town like 3 of the next 4 weekends. I'll be here for class, but I'm traveling, so put a little more strain on it.
Where are you going?
We want to know that.
Florida? No, Missouri this weekend. Daughter's parent day at Missouri State for college. Next weekend I have to go. I'm going to meet my work partner in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We're working on our portfolios for our clients. We're reviewing those, rebalancing all of that. Here a weekend, and then we go to, and I may not go to the last one, but Court Jr. has a soccer tryout at University of St. Louis, so he's got to go there for a camp. But anyway, so back to the class. The second one is real important. The third one, I had a lot of fun. I don't know, that's one of my favorite ones, especially that last slide that we went over about the garments of the harlot. So week 2 was heaven and earth. Week 3 was the harlot and a lot of characteristics. And I didn't even cover them all. I just covered some of the easier to understand major points. Today I'm going to back up. I skipped Romans 9. I was trying to fly through on that heavens and earth day, and I skipped Romans 9. I said, hey, you're going to study it. And then when I got back to looking at it again, I said, no, I can't do that. There's a couple of connectors in here that are very, very important. And so I wanted to go over this with you. I didn't want to just say, hey, go study Romans 9. Y'all wouldn't know what to look for. We're going to be talking about the remnant here. We're going to be talking about in the last days the Gentiles would be added to the church. And then this is to me the fun one. This is the one that we're going to have a lot of fun on. Try to go slow on it. So at first, let's all turn to Romans. We're going to be in Romans for the first half here. Romans 9. And as you can see in verse 29, Paul just directly quotes him. And he says, I'm quoting him. So there's no question. This is an easy one. right? Some of the metaphors that you're not told is a metaphor, you're not told what it means, those are the hard ones. Kind of have to piece those together. But here, it's real easy. He's saying, hey, remember when Isaiah said this or Isaiah said this? This is now being fulfilled. This is one of the easy examples here. Isaiah 1:9, and he's talking, remember he's saying, give ear, ye rulers, ye people of Judah and Jerusalem. The vision is about Judah and Jerusalem. You've been rebellious, you don't know your master, all of this stuff. He says, I'm going to destroy you, but except that we had a very small remnant, we would have been completely wiped out, like Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, and then Paul quotes him there in Romans 9. So where I want to start in Romans 9 is in verse 17. And this is kind of cool because it kind of lets you know why God is doing things the way he did. Why is he letting his people go through this great persecution? Acts 1:8 or 8:1. If you remember last week, the great persecution there that they were undergoing in Jerusalem, why is that happening? Why did he put his people into Egypt and have them go through all of the trouble that they were going through under Pharaoh there at the end? Why does he do it? And I like to term it as, and I don't think anybody else out there does it, this is just the way I say it, for my own understanding. You say it how you want to. But the answer is kind of there in the middle of Romans 9, is he's doing it for dramatic flair. Okay, he's making this big spectacle so that the world would know those are his people. What? What are you doing?
What?
Oh, is he making you laugh?
No, even.
She's thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Everything's fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Okay. So he's got this dramatic flair. He needs the world to see, hey, you are in this dire situation. You are in this situation that nobody can overcome unless you've got divine backing, so that the world would know, so that the Israelites would know, but so that the world would know that he is their God. And when you're reading through the Old Testament, Exodus especially and beyond, he says it over and over, so that you would know, so that they would know, so that they would know, so that they would know. If he just says, picks a civilization, hey, you're my people, and nothing happens, doesn't prove anything to anybody. So he's doing this for a reason. He's putting them through this for a reason. How in the world did a very large group of slaves that Pharaoh did not want to lose leave Egypt? Oh, their God is real. Their God carried them out. Their God saved them. That's what he's saying there. And he does the same thing in the first century. They're undergoing that great persecution there, and they overcome it. They overcome it, and the world now sees Christianity as God's people, not Judaism. They were kind of two parts of the same group for a while, and then after this is over, they're like, oh no, wait, this is kind of a different thing. There's a lot of confusion by the faithful and the Gentiles. There's a lot of confusion there in the first century. So what he does is he's saying, Paul has this, he's like, man, I feel sorry for the Jews here. I feel sorry for Jerusalem. I have this sorrow. You're fitted for destruction. start in verse 17. It says, "For the scripture saith unto Pharaoh, even for this same purpose have I raised thee up, that I might show my power in thee, and that my name might be declared throughout all the earth." That's what I just got finished saying. Then he says, "Therefore hath he mercy on whom he will have mercy, and whom he will be hardeneth, and whom he will harden." Hold on, I gotta put my glasses on.
Is that what it is?
Is that what that is?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was,
yeah.
that.
"Thou wilt say thee unto me, Why doth he yet find fault? For who hath resisted his will? Nay, but, O man, who art thou that repliest against God? Shall the thing formed say to him that formed it, Why hast thou made me thus? Hath the potter power over the clay of the same lump to make one vessel unto honor and another to dishonor?" And then here we go, starting in 22. "What if God, willing to show his wrath and to make his power known, endureth with much long suffering the vessels of wrath fitted to destruction?" He's going to be destroying the Jews. He's putting up with them. He's been promising it since when? When was the first time there was a prophecy or a promise to the Jews that he was going to destroy them? He's going to wipe them out. When was the first one that you get? Is it in Isaiah? Is it earlier than Isaiah?
Of wiping out
Yeah.
Noah?
Well, the Israelites weren't a thing yet then. You're close
Okay.
though.
So after,
A little bit after Noah. It's in Deuteronomy. It's the end of Deuteronomy. When you go read chapter 28 through 32, it's like, well, that's some pretty bad stuff. If y'all ever read that verse of the Song of Moses, it's rough stuff. It's very, okay? He's saying, you are the vessels fitted. He's been putting up with you. He's been putting, and why was he putting up with them? We've said it in here before. Why didn't he just destroy them in 1400 BC or 600 BC or 700 BC? Why didn't he destroy them then? Christ wasn't here yet. He hadn't put up with them. They had to fulfill all of the prophecies of bringing the Messiah into the world, so he couldn't do that. So he's putting up with them. And he says, we Christians, we're the object of his mercy. We are the Christians made up of Jews that converted, the remnant is what he's talking about there. He'll get to it in a second. And the Gentiles. This is who now has been given the kingdom. This is now God's people. The Gentiles were not his people before, right? Before Christ, they were the islands from afar. They were the strangers. They were the uncircumcised. You get a bunch of different examples of it. But now that we're transitioning from Judaism to Christianity under the Church of Christ, under the New Testament, they would be called the sons of the living God. Therein, the Jews that rebelled are finally getting destroyed. And then he starts quoting Isaiah. He quotes in verse 27, he quotes Isaiah 10. I'll go back to that slide. Isaiah cries out concerning Israel, though the number of the sons of Israel may be like the sand of the sea, only the remnant will be saved. And just as Isaiah foretold in verse 29, if the Lord of armies had not left us descendants, we would have become like Sodom. We would have been like Gomorrah. Had a small portion of us not converted to Christianity, we'd have been completely wiped out. The remnant here represents the Christians. In the same way, and this is important to get, it's kind of switching over to 11. This is the theme of Isaiah. This is your type, antitype. In the same way, at the present time, so that stuff that was going on back then to the attack from Assyria, the going into Babylonian captivity, the things that were written aforetime were written for our learning. They were happening the same way so that at the present time they would understand. This type, anti-type is not only not going to stop, it's going to get stronger and stronger. You have to understand it. And I'm going to be going out of my way to showing that all the time. Isaiah is massively metaphorical, massively type, anti-type. If you're reading a lot of this stuff and you're trying to make any of it literal, you're in trouble. Okay? A lot of it is not literal. He's saying here in verse 29, he's like, hey, except that we had been like, had a remnant saved, we would have been like Sodom and Gomorrah. The rest of us are going to be consumed. He's talking about the Jews. He's crying for the Jews. He's sad for the Jews. Paul is, because he knows they're about to get destroyed. They're about to be consumed. And just like Daniel, half of y'all were in my Daniel class. They're at the end of Daniel. And he's saying, hey, when is the temple, the city and the temple going to be destroyed? And he gives a timeline of it. They were going to be consumed. You can go read Daniel 9:27. It's all talking about the same stuff. The Bible is so massively interlocking and connected. It is very connected. God would make short work of the Jews. He would finish the work. He would end the Jewish age. We're about to get into chapter 2 here. Believe it or not, Vanover. We're gonna go through chapter 2 and 3 today. That's how fast we're gonna go.
You're gonna get through 45 slides today?
Oh, it's only like 3 slides.
Oh.
But when we get to chapter 13, we might be there like a month. I don't know. It just is how much you talk. It depends on how much you talk.
It depends on how much you talk.
No, it doesn't work.
I
Yes.
have a question.
Okay.
What do you think that how do you think the Jews today feel about all of this? And,
Oh, I
mean,
don't know.
there's too many that I connected with or have a connection, and it's not a religious connection or anything like that, but this is right here in black and white. I mean,
I don't know. First of all, I don't know that they're going to give any credence to Paul, but to Isaiah they should. If they know they're Old Testament prophets, it's not a pretty picture. They don't. You're saying they don't know.
They're not taught Isaiah 53 at all in synagogue, ever.
I mean, this is just.
I know, but
black
they-
and
What
white.
do they know?
They read the Talmud is what they do.
Okay, so something that was written in the
Ignore this.
5th century.
Yes.
Oh.
I have plenty of Jewish friends that have never read Isaiah 53.
You know, why don't I ignore, hey, that chair's got 3 legs on it there. You know?
I just tell you how it is. Like,
It really does, it's got 3 legs on it.
I had a friend that I showed Isaiah 53 to, and he's like, we never talk about this in synagogue. I was like, well, who does this sound like? He's like,
A little
sounds
like
like
Jesus.
Jesus is what
Yeah.
it sounds like.
Oh, man.
So,
Just,
Well,
So, yeah, they
and so
are-
Ben Shapiro's claim is that there have been too many people to count that have come and claimed to be Messiah. And so, and for whatever reason, Jesus doesn't check all their boxes.
yeah, so we just don't, we'll make our own. You know, I'm just
I don't
trying,
know.
today's living. This
I don't
is
know.
how-
I've got a few Jewish friends, and I like them. I don't know on the religion
Yeah,
why they don't.
well, if you're watching Ben Shapiro, you should see his talk with William Lane Craig. William Lane Craig destroys him.
Yeah.
Yes, no,
I've seen
And-
that.
we've watched
and-
it,
Yeah,
yeah,
and he skirts every issue that William
Oh.
Lane Craig brings up.
1000%.
And so,
Kinda
he-
leaves him a little
Ben-
bit.
yeah, Ben Shapiro maybe.
Ben Shapiro is a man of many words, but
Yeah, he
he
is.
kind of started running out of them
He
at
did.
some point,
He
which
did.
says a lot, you know?
You know, so, and he was brought up in synagogue too, to ignore that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I can't blame him for not, saying like, oh, well, there's a bunch. Like, we have that in, Acts? There's a bunch
Yeah.
of false messiahs too.
Yeah.
And there's only one that, if we wanna take that Jewish point, there's only one Messiah that came through all the muck.
Right.
And it's the one described in Isaiah 53, and it's Jesus, what do you know?
Yeah. The other claim that he made that was strange was, he was like, people don't get killed for saying they're Messiah, so it doesn't even make any sense that he was crucified. So that's another thing
but-
that they kind of like.
But
But
the
the way,
Messiah is
the way
killed
that
in
it plays
53,
out
that's
in our
the-
New
that's-
Testament,
yeah.
it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And it works out in history if we look at the times and go through, like, what did, the Roman Empire look like back then? What did Hebrews look like back then? What were they doing? What were they going through? What was the Sanhedrin doing? And I mean, it all adds
You
up.
would think with what they went through at the hand of the Romans, that should be, light bulbs going off to them.
you would think.
Yeah, but I
You
think
would
the
think.
biggest thing is
Yeah.
it's easy to reject something that you don't know about. And if they only read the Old Testament and they've never touched the New Testament, then you don't understand how Jesus fulfills the
I
prophecies.
guess.
Well, and if they're
You
not even
have to
taught it.
have both parts.
Yeah, they're not even taught
That
it.
must
That's
be
the,
it.
that's the
Oh,
problem,
it's just-
is they read the Talmud more than they do the Bible.
So I said we would get through chapter 3 today, depending upon something. Anybody remember what that was?
You know what? I'm
You know
gonna-
how much we talked?
I just had to
Not
know
you,
these things.
not you.
You know, we talk so much about the Jews. and
I can leave.
No,
I can go.
I can go.
Okay, back to Romans here, back to Romans. So the remnant of the Jews, the ones that convert to Christianity, they would be spared from that destruction. They're joined in with the Gentiles. The rest of them, they're going to be completely destroyed. They're removed. Remember the end of Hebrews there, Hebrews 12. They're removed. He's taking them out of the way so that Christianity can take off, so that the world would know Christianity. And don't make this mistake. Somebody asked me once, are you saying Christianity was founded in 70 AD? I'm like, no, not at all. That's not at all what I'm saying. It was founded on the day of Pentecost in 30 AD. Okay. Christians, they followed this new law. They followed what we call the New Testament. They followed this new law of faith. They followed Christ and his teachings. The Jews were rejecting that. They were trying to go back to that old law of works, and their heart wasn't in the right place anyway. And you can hear 100 different lessons on that. Okay, so that's Romans 9, talking about the remnant, and that was a real good example of somebody in the New Testament saying, hey, you know how Isaiah said this? It's now being fulfilled. We're that remnant. The rest of them are about to get destroyed. Okay. Fast forward through all of this. Did this last time. This was my favorite slide. For those of you that weren't here last week, the harlot is literally wearing Aaron's high priest clothes.
Oh, okay.
So, you remember that, right?
Yes.
That was what we ended on last time.
Yes.
If you want to look into, we're about to start into chapter 2 here of Isaiah. If you want to look into the book of Micah, you can. They're like a copy and paste. Isaiah 1 and 2 is like a copy and paste of Micah 3 and 4. Because how many people are in here are experts in the minor prophets? Nobody. Said nobody ever. Right? I'm not either. And when you read some of that stuff, if you're not familiar with those books, you're left scratching your head a lot of times. What is he talking about? Look for those clues. Christ, church being established, Gentiles coming in, New Testament guys saying, hey, remember that prophet? When he said this, it's now being fulfilled. That's how you can kind of figure out what it is. And then all the rest of the stuff is joined to it. The leaders, hear ye leaders, God's going to hide from the wicked. Jerusalem would be desolated. The church would be established. The Gentiles were going to be added to it. The gospel being spread, going forth from Jerusalem, first being preached from Jerusalem and then spread on from there. That's a big one. You'll see that one a lot. Swords to plowshares. He tells us what Peter. It's not a fighting kingdom. This is a spiritual kingdom. My kingdom is not of this world. We're not doing this warring stuff. It's not like David going around conquering everybody. Isaiah 2:2. This is a good verse. It's loaded. Now it will come about in the last days that the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains and will be raised above the hills, and all nations will stream unto it. All nations will flow into it. That's your clue. First of all, mountain of the house of the Lord. You're taught that since vacation Bible school. Tiptoe at God's house. I hated that. I was never a quiet kid. I got in trouble every time. Mountain, this is kingdom. This is talking about the church here. It's talking about the church. It's going to be over all these other kingdoms, not in a earthly, I'm going to be the center of government here on earth and have an earthly kingdom. It's going to be above them. It's going to be a spiritual kingdom. My kingdom is not of this world. It's worried about your soul, not about your tax revenue. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. It's not a worldly, earthly kingdom. It's the church of Christ. The last days. This is something that's a little bit controversial out there. When I read the last days, I just go ahead and add on in my own brain, you don't have to do this, the last days of the Jews, the last days of Judaism. Daniel 10:14 says, hey, I'm gonna show you what's going to happen to your people in their latter days. The Jews, only the Jews, your people. Matthew chapter 24, verse 3. They're sitting there, they're outside Jerusalem, and they're looking down at the temple, and they're asking Christ, when are you coming back to destroy that thing? When is the end of this age, this Jewish age? And it's repeated there again in Matthew 13. I think it's 13. And there was a major problem in 1611. What happened in 1611? Anybody know? The King James Bible. That is the correct answer. You win today. The King James Bible is published, and what happens in Matthew chapter 24 in the King James Bible that causes an insane amount of problems? They have the word age translated as world. That word is never translated world. Now, a lot of the translations later on have come back and fixed it. So most of y'all's Bibles should say age. I don't know how many different translations we have in here. But if you look at the King James, it will say world. Everybody else has gone back and fixed it. And when you go back and study the original languages, you're like, yeah, that's not cosmos. That's this Ionos or something. I'm not Greek, Hebrew.
What's eon?
Eon, is that what it is? So it means age, the Jewish age. When are you going to destroy that temple? When's the end of the Jewish age coming? And then what is Matthew chapter 24 about? The destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. When is it's the last days of the Jews, of the last days of the Jewish age. He's removing the heavens and earth. He's removing the leaders and the people of Judaism. It's their last days. So that and in those last days of the Jews, he's going to set up the church. We're not in the last days today. This is just us. The last days are the way I look at it is first century. I just say first century. Nebuchadnezzar's dream, during the time of those Roman kings, meaning when the Caesars started doing their thing. That's another way to look at it. I think it's Matthew 13 in some of the parables. He's talking and there's a repeat of that word, age or world. American Standard translates it properly in Matthew 24, but they make the same mistake as the King James there in, I think, Matthew 13. But all of your newer translations translate it correctly. They've gone back and fixed it.
Do you know why they would do that? Translate it to world?
Because they wanted the passage to be about the end of the world.
Okay.
Because what was going on right before, not really right before, what was happening a couple centuries before King James was being written, translated? What was going on in Jerusalem? The Crusades. They really, really wanted to get back into that, and they needed all of this stuff to not be about Jerusalem, that people go out of their way to not have Jerusalem destroyed. They want Jerusalem to be this earthly kingdom. They want to be a part of it. Like the apostles even missed it. Paul and Christ were having to say, no, it's not like that. This kingdom is going to be different. That's my guess. That's my guess on why they missed it. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's what I'm thinking.
So in this Isaiah 2:2, mountains and hills, normally through most of the Old Testament, mountains and hills is where you worship gods. It's the dwelling place of gods. Like even outside of the Jewish belief system, like Mount Olympus, that's where the gods were. So I guess I'm asking this question here, is that what's happening here in Isaiah 2:2? Is he saying that the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains? It'll be the ultimate location of God, the place where you will worship, metaphorically.
I'll have to go back and look at all the mountain ones. I've always understood it to be kingdom.
Okay.
But just on the surface, I don't think it changes anything. I think it's saying the same thing. Because you've got, in Hebrews 12, he's got to bring in this mountain that cannot be moved, the one in Daniel chapter 2. I translate it as kingdom. I'll look into it more and try to, instead of putting kingdom, put it as the highest hill, or the place of worship instead. But when you think about it, those two things are kind of the same thing anyway.
Yeah, I think so. Well, yeah.
Loosely,
Right.
okay?
There's a hook in the idea, like, so the Garden of Eden, for example, there's two references to it. One of them is it's a garden, the other one is like the mountain of the Lord. And so the Garden of Eden is thought to be low in some places, but the other references to it are on top of mountain, which doesn't make physical sense of the Garden of Eden, but it goes to the point that the mountains and the high places are where the gods dwell, and this is where you will go to worship them. This is like over the history of Israel, there was always the building up and the tearing down of the high places. These were all worships of idolatrous gods.
Right. That's talked about a ton in here.
Yeah.
He'll get into it. I'll look into it.
Okay.
To me, it sounds like it's kind of saying the same thing anyway. The true one, the Church of Christ,
Yeah.
whether it be kingdom or whether it be the place of worship, it's the same thing.
I think so.
Okay.
What does your Bible say about in Isaiah 2:1? What's your version?
where the son of Amos saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem, same thing as in 1:2.
Well, Kurt, I've always considered the mountain to be, as we know, Jerusalem's built on a mountain. And no matter where you came from, you had to go up to Jerusalem. It was always up to Jerusalem. And now this could be figurative, but I do believe it refers to Jerusalem, not necessarily the city, but the place, the holy dwelling where God lives.
So I think we kind of touch on that in the heavens and earth class, that I agree with what you're saying there, that it's calling the church the New Jerusalem. It's this heavenly or this spiritual Jerusalem, and that it is figuratively representing. When you see Revelation 21, verse 2.
Well, and you notice, even in going through Daniel or going through other revelations, they refer to this new eternal kingdom that will be rising, and it will be Jerusalem, and that all the nations of the earth will be looking to it, towards it. So I think the literal Jerusalem might not be the proper way to look at that, because as we've seen, the Jerusalem that we know is not one that all the nations turn to right now.
Right. They don't ever.
So we know that.
I say it's the church. I say the New Jerusalem is the Church of Christ. Okay? And that kind of goes along with
I
what
don't have any problems with that.
that goes along with what you're saying.
What I'm trying to say is that I think we were talking about earlier about Jews and the fact that they can't accept Isaiah 53, but I think it's more than just that particular chapter, because they are looking for a physical
Yeah.
Jerusalem
Right.
to rise, and the kingdom of David to return as it was when he ruled it.
Right.
So, it's physical versus prophecy, versus the idealism.
Yeah. And so one, we covered all that in the first week. And two,
Sorry, I wasn't here.
I know. But just saying that we've already addressed it. But two, I say the old is the literal physical and the new is the spiritual metaphor.
I definitely think that that's got a lot to do with it, because if you looked at it and tried to make it literal, when you're talking prophecy, you're always going to find some problems. And I think in this particular problem, a Jewish person coming from looking for a physical revival of a kingdom is going to have a lot of
Right.
problems with prophecy.
Right. Exactly. Okay. And many people will come and say, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, for the house of the Lord of Jacob, God of Jacob. Let him teach him his ways, walk in his, for the law will go out from Zion and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. The law, not the old law, not the law of Moses. That thing's already been out there. This is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about Acts chapter 2. We're talking about Luke 24. And that repentance for forgiveness of sins would be proclaimed in his name to all nations, beginning from Jerusalem. You'll see this phrase, the law going out from, I'm going to pour out my spirit, and the law will go forth from Jerusalem when I pour out my spirit. And it's in Joel, it's in several places. And they say there when that's happening, like, yeah, remember when the Old Testament prophets were saying this? This is now being fulfilled. Acts chapter 2, it's first being preached. The gospel of Jesus Christ is first being preached there in Jerusalem, and then it goes on from there. In those days, 10 people from all nations. The Gentiles were going to get to be a part of this. This is a big, big difference. To us, it's nothing. It's like, oh yeah, of course, we get that. We don't even have to think about it, because we're pretty much probably all Gentile in here, right? We're not Jew. You're either Jew or Gentile. It's nothing for us to understand it. But for a Jew back then, they were elitist. They were like, oh, we're God's people, nothing's going to happen to us, we can do anything we want. Those are Gentiles, that's unclean. But the Good Samaritan,
Court, just to reinforce you too, and you may have already mentioned this, I'll
probably,
apologize.
is week 1. I know what you're going to say. No.
Romans the second chapter reinforces your fact that it be Gentiles, and it says in verses 14, 15, for instance, some outsiders who are not required to follow the law often live quite naturally by its teachings, even though the law wasn't given to them. In themselves, they have law.
Probably more faithful than most of the Jews, right?
What I'm trying to say is it reinforces your point, is what I'm saying in Romans 2.
Just a comment about the Jerusalem conference, that was when they understood it, and that was 15 years after the cross. So it took the Jews and the people then that long to figure it out.
And did they have the internet back then? They have phones? No.
Man.
And what was the internet? What did I say the internet was? An AOL chat room. That's what I thought it was. They didn't have that, so it took time. It took a long time for the gospel, for the apostles to go out into all the world and preach unto all nations. It took time for that to happen. It took them time to comprehend it and get it. Yeah, the people there in Jerusalem got it right away. But for the people all over the rest of the world, the faithful, the Gentiles even, it took time to get that message out. 15 years. It took a lot longer to get it into other areas. But it eventually did happen. You've forsaken your people, you are like the Philistines. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one because I want to spend time on 2:19. You are like the Philistines. You are like Sodom and Gomorrah. We're going to start getting into these burdens here. If you're familiar with the book of Isaiah, he is comparing them to all the nations round about him. And it's like, if you tell a Jew you're like Sodom and Gomorrah, that's like the lowest blow you can give to them. It's like the worst cut down you can say to a Jew. You're like Sodom and Gomorrah. I am not. They'll fight you. They understood it to be like that. He does that. He says, you're like Sodom and Gomorrah. You're worse. You're like Israel, who was destroyed and removed by the Assyrians. But you're worse. Jeremiah 3. We went over that last week. You're like the Philistines. These are the bad things that you do. You're like Egypt. You're like Babylon. You, Judah and Jerusalem. It's not a happy book. They're going to be destroyed. Get used to the Judah and Jerusalem getting compared to these other nations. Here it's easy because he says like the Philistines. Later on, it's just going to be straight metaphor, and it's harder. You have to really dig into it. 2:19. May spend the rest of this class here. Chapter 3, I only have like 1 or 2 verses. And they shall go into the holes of the rocks and into the caves of the earth for the fear of the Lord and the glory of his majesty when he ariseth to shake terribly the earth. He's been talking the whole time here about destroying Judah and Jerusalem. And when the church will be established, when the Gentiles will be able to start coming to the church, and look what book quotes him, paraphrases it. He said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, hide us from the face of him that sitteth, and the wrath, hide us from the wrath of God. Revelation 6:16 is coming from Isaiah 2:19. This is about the destruction of Judah and Jerusalem, except the remnant part. When the Church of Christ would be established and the Gentiles would be able to be a part of it. First century event. This is saying the same thing. It's about the same thing.
Is this when the Romans came out?
Mm-hmm. Luke, this is Christ. I believe this is Christ right before he's crucified. There's a whole bunch of people that are crying, and he's like, hey, I'm crying for me. This is about to go down for you. You should be crying for yourself. You're going to be saying, fall on us, hide us, cover us from the wrath of God that's coming. Go read that, those few 3 or 4 verses right before Christ is crucified. He's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. At the end of Romans, that was about to happen. He's saying, you Jews, you be crying for yourself. That's what Revelation is saying. That's what Luke is saying. That's what Christ is saying. That's what Isaiah is saying. And I've not used commentaries to learn this stuff. I told you how I did this. I have started for prepping for this class. I've started reading what everybody else says. 1, to make sure I don't miss anything obvious. But 2, so that y'all can kind of know what other people are saying and that I'm not the only one saying this. Matthew Henry, who I did not expect to agree with me, this is his take on this verse. It was so particularly at the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans. That's what I say. And then he references these 2 verses. I'm not the only one. This guy's been dead for 400 years. He's not even the old dead dudes that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the guys in the 3rd, 4th century. So the quote there, the paraphrase quote, connects Revelation to the destruction of Jerusalem. But there's something even better in this verse. Can anybody point it out? I have 10 minutes. I'll wait. No, I'm kidding. I'm not going
Which
to.
verse are you talking about?
So,
Which
what?
verse again are you talking about?
In Isaiah 2:19, there is something in a loose roundabout way that connects Revelation to, I won't say the destruction of Jerusalem, that's what it's about, but the transition from Judaism to Christianity. We talked about it in the Heavens and Earth class in 2 weeks ago. The shaking, you're right, Mike. You're right. When he ariseth to shake terribly the earth. These Hall of Fame people in Hebrews 11, these Old Testament greats, they didn't get to see the promise. But you have come to the church of the firstborn, the general assembly. I had to shake the heavens and earth. And by shake, I mean remove. I had to remove Judaism, the leader, Isaiah 1, 2, 9, and 10, for those of you that weren't here. I had to remove the rulers and the people of Judaism. I had to remove Judaism so that the unmovable mountain, so that the church of Christ could take its place. That's when he does that. This is talking about the transition from Judaism to Christianity. When the Gentiles would be added, when the church is established, founded, and the Gentiles would be added. It's connected to this. And what I say Revelation is about? The transition from Judaism to Christianity. Divorcing that harlot that was wearing Aaron's high priest clothes and getting married to the bride. You just see multiple chapters about the bride. The church.
So just to be sure, in Isaiah 2:19 there, you're saying that shake terribly the earth is not a prediction of an earthquake.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not literal. There's not going to be a lot literal in here. And I think Hebrews 12 explains that. It says, and when I say, somebody read Hebrews 12:28 real quick. I think it's 28.
Hebrews 12:28.
Is it 28? Yeah.
I'm literally on it right now. What on earth?
There you go, read it.
That's crazy. Okay.
It might be 27 though.
Okay, therefore, since we are received a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe. Is that,
Read the previous verse.
okay,
It is the previous verse.
27?
Yeah.
Alright. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. Is that what you wanted?
He says, when I say shake, I mean remove. That's translated to our modern day English. He goes, I'm saying the word shake here, but what I mean by shake, it signifieth, I'm going to remove it. I've got to remove this old kingdom so that what does 28 start off with? so that the new kingdom
Cannot be shaken.
that cannot be shaken
Since we are receiving a
takes its
kingdom
place.
that cannot be
They
shaken.
were currently receiving this new system. It was founded on the day of Pentecost in 30 AD. They were out busy getting it set up, spread all over, getting the law, all of that, writing the New Testament. Isaiah 2:19, in two different ways, really connects Revelation with the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans. It's the end of the Jewish age. It's the latter days of Daniel's people. That's what it's talking about. That chapter 21, who was it? Half of y'all were in my Revelation 21 class. That is not talking about heaven. That thing is coming down from God out of heaven. And then he says, come here, I'm going to show you the bride. It's not heaven. We know what the bride is. But when we read chapter 21, our brains short circuit and we're like, oh yeah, that's heaven. No, it's not. That thing was coming out of heaven, and it's the church. 3:14. We're going to do it. The Lord will enter into judgment with the ancients of his people and the princes thereof, for ye have eaten up the vineyards. We have the first iteration of the parable of the vineyard. Christ is drawing inspiration from Isaiah, which I'm pretty sure Isaiah drew the inspiration from Christ. Which came first? Not important. God left the rulers in charge of his people. They did a terrible job. They beat one, they killed another. You beat my people to pieces, you grind them. And you're going to have this kingdom taken away from you because you were bad people. We're going to transition from Judaism to Christianity. You will hear me say this 1,000 times. And I mean that in the revelation sense, the complete number of times, not literal. The Jews were rejecting and rebelling Christ. The scribes and Pharisees, when you read at the bottom of chapter 21, they're like, I think he's talking about us. And they were correct. Isaiah is the messianic prophet. Keep that in your head. He uses things that were going on at their time to illustrate what would happen. He's talking about the first century. He's talking about the transition from Judaism to Christianity. He's using the Assyrians, the Babylonians. He's using the things they knew then as examples. He was going to send them Elijah the prophet. Does he do that literally?
Sins of John the Baptist.
Sins of John the Baptist. Elijah's the type, John the Baptist is the antitype. He can't say, I'm going to send you John the Baptist, and be like, But if he says, I'm going to send you Elijah the prophet, like, oh, okay, I know what you're talking about. He has to do that all the time. He talks in examples that they understand, but it's not literal. He's the messianic prophet. He's pointing to the things in the first century. And so while all of this is going on, he gets down, and you could go read the full chapter for yourself. I'm trying to get to the harder stuff. This is some of the easier stuff. Luke sits there and quotes him. Luke 21, Matthew 24, these are well-known destruction of Jerusalem passages in the Bible. And he literally quotes Isaiah. Isaiah is talking about the transition from Judaism to Christianity. Revelation is talking about the transition from Judaism to Christianity.